Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, members of the media, friends, and colleagues. I would like to warmly welcome you to the first Jakarta Forum on ASEAN-China relations held in celebration of the 30th anniversary of the ASEAN-China dialogue relations. My name is Gilang Kembara, and I will be your master of ceremony throughout this event. Before we begin, may I extend our warmest gratitude to the Chinese mission to ASEAN, the permanent mission of the Philippines to ASEAN, and the Center for Strategic and International Studies for co-hosting and supporting this event. To begin today's event, we have two distinguished guests to present their opening remarks. In the interest of time, I kindly ask our distinguished guests to present their opening remarks within 5 minutes of time. Now, I would like to warmly invite His Excellency Noel Servigon, Permanent Representative of the Philippines to ASEAN, to present his opening remarks. Your Excellency, you may have the screen.
Secretary General Dato Lim Jokoy, Philippines Home Leader Elizabeth Bon Suceso, Vice Foreign Minister Liu Xiaohi, Director General Siddharthos Soryudipuro, colleagues in the Committee of Permanent Representatives to ASEAN, Ambassador Deng Xijun, Peter Yusuf Wanandi, and colleagues in the Center for Strategic and International Studies, esteemed speakers and scholars, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. History is formed through the compilation of past events, culminating in a narrative that human beings can reflect upon in the present and providing us an invaluable resource that is able to guide our actions as we prepare for the future. As we celebrate the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China dialogue relations in 2021, it is useful to take a step back and reflect on the past 30 years of Asean-China Partnership. After all, it is by taking stock of the past that we can measure how far we have reached our goal to enhance and strengthen our cooperation for mutual benefit. How do we describe the current state of ASEAN-China relations? The word vibrant comes to mind. However, it is easy to forget that 30 years ago, our relationship had quite humble beginnings. History shows that our successes today were built upon the foundation formed by the dedicated work of countless individuals in the past, fused together and strengthened by the binding properties of time. The development of ASEAN-China Partnership was built on a shared desire to foster friendly relations, mutually beneficial cooperation, and good neighborliness. And so it shall be that 3 decades from now, history will show once again that the accomplishments of the future will emerge with an elegant inevitability from that which has been raised up and molded by our collective efforts in the present day. By way of example, the ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership Vision 2030, which charts the future direction of ASEAN-China dialogue relations, would not have come to pass without the establishment of the ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership, which itself was facilitated by, among others, China's accession to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia. Narrowed even further, China's accession to the treaty would not have been possible without the countless exchanges and consultations on enhancing mutual trust and confidence that have taken place between ASEAN and China since the inception of dialogue relations in 1991. This illustrates that ASEAN-China Partnership has always been and will continue to be a constantly evolving enterprise that aims to contribute to the peace, stability, and prosperity of the region, anchored by ASEAN unity as well as ASEAN centrality in the regional architecture. In this regard, as country coordinator for ASEAN-China Dialogue Relations, the Philippines is honored to welcome you to the first Jakarta Forum in 2021 on the topic of the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China Dialogue Relations, which is intended to facilitate a frank, open, and robust exchange of views on the future prospects of ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership. I wish to thank our organizers, the Mission of China to ASEAN, and the Center for Strategic and International Studies of Indonesia for organizing this forum. I also wish to express our appreciation to all our distinguished experts for sharing their time with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your opening remarks. Next, I would like to invite His Excellency Ambassador Teng Si-chun, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to ASEAN, to present his opening remarks. Your Excellency, you may have the screen.
Thank you. Excellency Datu Ling Zhou-hui, Secretary General of ASEAN. Excellency Luo Zhaohui, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of China. Excellency Elizabeth Bien Suceso, and the Secretary and ASEAN SOM Leader, Department of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines. Excellency Suharto Suryatipolo, Director General for ASEAN Cooperation and SOM Leader, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia. Excellency Noel Sebagon, Permanent Representative of the Philippines to ASEAN and other ambassadors of CPR. Dear Mr. Joseph Wanandi, founder of CSIS Indonesia. Dear colleagues and friends, a warm welcome to all of you to today's Jakarta Forum on China-ASEAN relations. Since the forum was founded 2 years ago, 8 events were successfully carried out under the forum's framework, covering a wide range of topics of shared interest for China and ASEAN. For instance, the Belt and Road Initiative, building a community with a shared future, financial cooperation, joint fight against COVID-19, and regional economic recovery. The forum was now grown into an important platform to promote China-ASEAN relations and East Asia cooperation in the Jakarta Channel. On behalf of the Chinese mission to ASEAN, I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to all colleagues and friends for your strong support to the Jakarta Forum. This year marks the 30th anniversary of China-ASEAN dialogue relations. China will organize over 30 activities throughout the whole year to commemorate this milestone year and seize this opportunity to deepen our relationship. Today's forum carries special significance as it kicks off a series of commemorative events of the 30th anniversary of China-ASEAN relations in the Jakarta Channel. A review of China-ASEAN dialogue relations since 1991 always makes us full of excitement. The past 30 years have witnessed many touching point moments when China and ASEAN helped each other in trying times. We worked hand in hand to overcome major crises, including the ASEAN financial crisis in 1997, the SARS in 2003, the bird flu in 2004, the international financial crisis in 2008. We rendered each other valuable support in responding to the onslaught of Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, the Wenchuan earthquake in 2008, among other major natural disasters. Every crisis has but brought China and ASEAN closer to each other. At this moment, China and ASEAN are carrying forward our traditional friendship by jointly fighting COVID-19 and promoting regional economic recovery. The past 30 years have witnessed the unremitting efforts and fruitful outcomes that China and ASEAN made through close cooperation. We have kept pace with the times and kept our mind open to break new ground. China and ASEAN were trailblazers on many fronts. For instance, China was the first dialogue partners to forge a strategic partnership, establish and upgrade the FTA, and map out a medium and a long-term vision for future relations with ASEAN, thus playing a leading role in ASEAN's relations with its dialogue partners. Moreover, cooperation mechanisms and the platforms between China and ASEAN have kept expanding, with our political mutual trust deepening, connectivity and business cooperation accelerating, and people-to-people ties being ever closer. All these have pointed to the fact that China-ASEAN partnership has grown into the most successful and vibrant model for regional cooperation in the Asia Pacific. The past 30 years have witnessed the joint upholding of principles and justice by China and ASEAN. Together, we have upheld the spirit of East Asian cooperation featuring mutual respect, consensus building, openness, inclusiveness, and accommodating the comfort levels of all parties, and promoted the healthy and steady development of the ASEAN-led architecture for regional cooperation. We have opposed protectionism, defended multilateralism, maintained a role-based free trade system, and worked together for the successful signing of the RCEP. We have maintained close coordination on multilateral platforms such as the United Nations, APEC, ASEAN, to jointly protect the common interests of developing countries. Colleagues and friends, there is a well-known Chinese poem that rightfully describes the status of current China-ASEAN relations, which reads like this: "The big river is wide at full tide, and sail hands with ease in soft breeze." As we celebrate the 30th anniversary of our dialogue relations, we must not be complacent about what we have achieved and come to a halt. Instead, we need to actively strive for the new progress, commit ourselves to taking our strategic partnership to a higher level, and contributing more to peace, stability, development, and the prosperity of our region. All our guests present here today have been personally involved in the extraordinary journey of China-ASEAN relations and witnessed many historic moments of the past 30 years. The great achievements of China-ASEAN cooperation cannot be made without the concerted efforts of the peoples from all walks of life on both sides. I look forward to hearing the insights from Dr. Ling and some leaders from China, the Philippines, and Indonesia. And I also hope all experts could have in-depth discussions and pour your wisdom on further enhancing China-ASEAN relations. To conclude, I wish today's event a full success. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, to celebrate the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China relations, the organizers have prepared some short videos to commemorate the event. May I ask our technicians to prepare and play the videos once they are ready. made by the organizers of the event. Next, to further commemorate the event, we will be taking a group photo with all of our distinguished speakers, moderators, and participants. May I kindly ask all of our participants to make themselves visible by turning on their cameras. Now, the organizers have also asked all of our participants to create the number 30 using these hand gestures. Please clench your left hand to form the number 0 and put up your right hand and form the number 3. I hope I'm doing it right for the organizer. So just please clench your left hand into the number 0 and put up your right hand and form the number 3. Since we have a lot of participants, I think it would take about up to 20 to 30 seconds to have all of our pictures taken. And so could I ask the technicians to take all the photos, please? And remind me once it's done. Thank you. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. That will be all for the group photo. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will now be moving to our keynote address. Now, again, within the interest of time, may I remind each of our distinguished speakers to present their keynote address within 10 minutes of time. To begin, I would like to warmly invite His Excellency Dato' Lim Jock Hoi, Secretary General of ASEAN, to present his keynote address. Your Excellency, you may have the screen.
Your Excellency Elizabeth Bonaceso, Under-Secretary and SOM Leader, Philippines. Your Excellency Lau Zuhai, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, People's Republic of China. Your Excellency Sudarto Suroyo Dipuro, Director General ASEAN, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia. Your Excellency Neo Savenion, Permanent Representative of Philippines to ASEAN. Excellency Ding Sujun, Ambassador of China to ASEAN. Bapak Yusuf Unandi, co-founder of CSIS. Excellency former Secretary General Ong King Yong, Excellency Ambassador of ASEAN Member State, distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you a very good morning and selamat pagi. I'm delighted to join you at this seminar to commemorate the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China dialogue relations. I would like to thank the permanent mission of Philippines to ASEAN and the mission of China to ASEAN for as well as CSIS for organizing this event. Distinguished participants, ASEAN-China relations began on the 19th July 1991 when then Chinese Foreign Minister, His Excellency Mr. Kian Ki-chen attended the opening session of the 24th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting in Kuala Lumpur as a guest of the government of Malaysia. Over the course of the next 30 years, ASEAN-China dialogue relations blossomed into one of the most important bilateral partnerships of ASEAN. Indeed, China has a special place in the annals of ASEAN as it lays claim to three notable achievements. First, China was ASEAN's first bilateral FTA partner. Second, with the exception of Papua New Guinea, China was the first non-regional state to accede to the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in the Southeast Asia. Third, China is the first nuclear weapon state to pledge its accession to the protocol to the Treaty of Southeast Asia Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone, SWANFES. The breadth and depth of the plan of action to implement the ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership for Peace and Prosperity 2021-2025, which cover more than 200 aspects of cooperation across the three community pillars, is a testament to the dynamism of this partnership. In concrete terms, China has been ASEAN's largest trading partner since 2009. Trade with China has doubled from US 235 billion in 2010 to US 507 billion in 2018. Even the COVID-19 pandemic, which have ravaged economies around the world, failed to dampen the strong bilateral economic ties. Going against the global trend, the trade volume between ASEAN and China for the first half of 2020 increased by 2.2%. As a result, ASEAN and China became each other's largest trading partner for the first time ever. China is also a major investor in the region. The foreign direct investment flow from China to ASEAN increased by 185% from US 3.6 billion in 2010 to US 9.1 billion in 2019. The fact that China is the fourth largest source of FDI among ASEAN dialogue partners after the United States, Japan, the European Union, points yet another area where ASEAN-China's partnership could be further strengthened. Specifically, China's support for an investment in ASEAN Smart City Network and the ASEAN Sustainable Urbanization Strategy would certainly be welcome to help ASEAN recover faster from COVID-19 pandemic and also to build a more robust, sustainable, and resilient ASEAN community. Likewise, synergizing the master plan of ASEAN Connectivity 2025 with the Belt and Road Initiative would also spur economic growth by improving ASEAN infrastructure and multimodal transportation while upgrading our connectivity with ASEAN, with China. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic is the gravest threat to our generation. With good friends like China, ASEAN has been able to hold our own in addressing this threat. We are grateful for China's support and contribution to COVID-19 Response Fund and the initiative to establish the ASEAN Plus 3 Reserve Medical Supplies. The availability of and supply of Chinese vaccine will also hasten the full reopenings of our economies. We also look forward to China's support to implement the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. At the same time, the COVID-19 pandemic also provides us with a silver lining to take stock and recalibrate our bilateral ties to face the new challenges of the new normal, as well as to strategize new ways to harness the opportunities of the fourth industrial revolution. In short term, our top priority should be to implement the remaining elements in the future work programs under ASEAN-China FTA agreement, upgrading the protocol. ASEAN and China should finalize the discussion on the further liberalization of trade in goods, as well as begin discussion on area mutual interest, such as non-tariff barriers, investment liberalization, and protection, as well as e-commerce. China's ratification of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which was announced by the Minister of Commerce, His Excellency Mr. Wang Wentao, yesterday, provide a much-needed push for multilateral free trade. China ratification, together with Thailand on the 9th February 2021, bring us one step closer to the entry into force of the world's largest FTA. China's steadfast support for ASEAN leadership and centrality in the RCEP negotiation was very much appreciated by ASEAN member states. As we look forward to early conclusion of the ratification process by remaining RCEP partner, we have to ensure that RCEP and ASEAN-China FTA are mutually reinforcing so that ASEAN and China can push ahead in strengthening supply chain connectivity, building the region's resilience, and achieving inclusive and sustainable post-pandemic economic recovery. The designation of this year commemorative year as a year of sustainable development cooperation is timely against the setback caused by COVID-19, strengthening our cooperation in the area such as climate change, impact mitigation, biodiversity, ecosystem management, combating marine debris, promoting clean energy, poverty eradication, and disaster management is highly relevant. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, while economics, trade, and investment take center stage, the strength of ASEAN-China relationship rests on the firm foundation of people-to-people's relation and its cultural ties. One of the strongest indicators of the dynamism of people-to-people's relation is the ever-increasing interest among the people of ASEAN and China to explore and understand each other's culture, as evidenced in the rise of tourist arrival at both ends. Two-way exchanges in 2019 between ASEAN and China exceeded 65 million arrivals, and China's nationals are the largest source of tourist arrival in the region. The ASEAN-China Young Leaders Scholarship is a bright spot in peoples-to-peoples exchanges. As a flagship program under the education sector, the ASEAN-China Young Leadership Scholarship has enabled over 100 talented ASEAN researchers and academics to pursue postgraduate studies, short-term research program, and training opportunity in China's top university since 2019. This scholarship program strengthens bilateral understandings and helps to enhance ASEAN human capital by promoting academic and vocational exchanges between ASEAN and China. ASEAN cultural cooperation is also enhanced through long-standing ASEAN-China Cultural Forum, which plays a pivotal role in facilitating networking and partnership amongst cultural professionals and practitioners. The designation of 2019 as the year of media exchanges brings a 21st century dimension to the historical ties by expanding our cooperation into information sector, covering various key areas, including capacity building, promoting exchanges and co-production of radio, film, TV, and digital content, as well as a new media and advanced technology. The China ASEAN Youth Creativity web banner held in July 2020 as an example of initiative to bring together a new generation of leaders to build bonds of friendships. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the work of the ASEAN-China Center, which celebrates 20th anniversary in November this year, is commendable. The ASEAN-China Center has not only promoted ASEAN and the culture of ASEAN member states, but also play a role of home away from home for many ASEAN students and their families. However, as we enter the fourth decade of the dialogue relation, we should strive to set course towards a more equitable partnership. For starters, we should cooperate to encourage and support more Chinese students, researchers, academics to conduct their studies in ASEAN. Similarly, ASEAN should bring a diverse reach of culture, cuisine, and art to all parts of China. A cultural version of the highly successful China ASEAN Expo as a focal point to mainstream ASEAN culture to the Chinese people may be worthy for some consideration. On balance, ASEAN-China bilateral relation is strong and stable. It is important that we remain committed to peaceful means of negotiation on South China Sea according to the principle of international law, including 1982 United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. We look forward to continue the close cooperation to conclude the second reading of the Code of Conduct of the South China Sea. Distinguished guests, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the 30th anniversary of the ASEAN-China dialogue relation marks our continuing journey with a renewed commitment towards a mutually beneficial relationship based on trust, respect for sovereignty, and the rule of law. I'm confident that the future for the next decade of the ASEAN-China dialogue relation will be even brighter. I wish all the participants have a fruitful deliberation at today's seminar. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your keynote address. Next, may I invite Her Excellency Elizabeth P. Buensuquesco, Som Leader of the Philippines, to present her keynote address. Your Excellency, you may have the screen.
Secretary General of ASEAN, Dr. Lim Chok-Hoi, Vice Foreign Minister Luo Chia-Hui, China's Ambassador to ASEAN Deng Xijun, Director General Siddhartha Suryodipuro, members of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, CPR, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, good morning to all of you. Yesterday, the 8th of March, the world celebrated International Women's Day. In the Philippines, the whole month of March is International Women's Month. I greet all the women in the world for their contributions in making our families, our communities, indeed our world, a better place to live in. Thank you for inviting me to this forum, which is a fitting way to celebrate this year's 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China dialogue relations. Although my name means good news, buen suceso, I cannot help but start my message with some bad news that now confront our region, our world. These challenges that pose existential threats to our daily lives and may yet linger on to harm our children and their children after them. Such threats include global and transboundary issues such as pandemic diseases, climate change, transnational crimes, terrorism and violent extremism, cybersecurity, territorial and maritime disputes, regional as well as internal strife and political instability, and others which endanger our peace, stability, and prosperity. We are also seeing the resurrection of misguided nationalism that threaten free trade and globalization, which had served us well as a driver of economic growth. The ongoing rivalry between China and the United States affects ASEAN, including the well-being of over 650 million citizens, as the fates of our countries have only become more intertwined. The international community relies on China and the US to be responsible actors on the world stage, forsaking the worst aspects of major power rivalries that have led us to ruin in the past. We saw the world grind to a halt as the COVID-19 pandemic caused massive loss of lives, debilitating economic and social disruption, triggering an unprecedented humanitarian crisis and daunting challenges in the years to come. But here is the silver lining behind these dark clouds that hover our horizons. We have platforms for cooperation that we could exploit to mitigate, if not eradicate, the ill effects of the difficulties and challenges that haunt us. One of the more substantive and comprehensive platforms is the Asean-China Partnership. Over the years, ASEAN and China have been closely working together to enhance our cooperation for our mutual benefit. ASEAN appreciates China's support for ASEAN centrality and unity in preserving and reifying an enduring ASEAN-centered regional architecture that is open, transparent, inclusive, and rules-based, as enunciated in the Asean Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. China's active engagement in ASEAN-led mechanisms, straddling all sectors of cooperation, has supported ASEAN in advancing its community-building efforts towards the realization of the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. Aside from effectively implementing our various commitments outlined in the Asean-China Strategic Partnership Vision 2030, the plan of action to implement the Asean-China Strategic Partnership for Peace and Prosperity 2021-2025, and other ASEAN-China leaders' declarations and statements, we can further elevate our strategic partnership to a higher level by working on the following, and if you will permit, my humble suggestions. First, we must learn to navigate our partnership and collaborate together in setting a clear direction where our long-term strategic interests can be achieved. I believe that we can only attain this goal by engaging in a partnership that not only considers and recognizes the legitimate interests of each partner, but also understands each other, particularly during times of disagreement. Second, we must continue to manage our differences peacefully. We must continue to engage in constructive dialogue while remaining watchful that progress is reflected on the ground. The test of the pudding is in the eating, my grandmother used to tell me. The maintenance of peace and stability in our region, sustained by the avoidance of escalation of tension and finding peaceful ways to address differences, is the test of this constructive partnership. This includes the negotiations now currently going on the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea, which the Philippines will endeavor to shepherd to advance to higher stages of completion during its term as country coordinator of ASEAN-China relations, with the support of China, of course, and other member states. Third, ASEAN-China cooperation in public health will secure the launchpad by which we jumpstart our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, ASEAN and China confronted the challenge of the pandemic in solidarity with one another by China providing medical supplies and sharing information on the pandemic, which were instrumental in saving precious lives. ASEAN greatly appreciated China's contribution of $1 million to the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund, as well as its donation of the much-awaited vaccines that people consider would lift us from this dark cloud of uncertainty that COVID-19 has imposed upon us. For 2021 and beyond, our cooperation should not only be responsive to the needs today, but also look forward, looking to prepare for the future. ASEAN and China must cooperate, must accelerate this cooperation in the production, procurement, and distribution of safe, effective, and affordable vaccines. As we learn more about COVID-19, we must continue to intensify our efforts in the exchange of information and data, undertake capacity building efforts, and conduct joint research. We should also work to preserve and restore ecological biodiversity and improve wildlife disease surveillance measures to control, prevent, and eradicate the spread of zoonotic diseases arising from the trade in animals and animal products. In this regard, we look forward to undertaking cooperation under the Asean-China Public Health Cooperation Initiative, recognizing that our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic is not just limited to enhancing health systems alone. ASEAN invites China to support the implementation of the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, ACRF, in its implementation plan. These were specifically designed to cut across all the three pillars of ASEAN, articulating ASEAN's broad strategies and identifying measures for recovery to build a resilient and a sustainable future. China may also consider supporting the soon-to-be established ASEAN Center on Public Health Emergencies and Emerging Diseases, APCHID, which may eventually become a center of excellence in the region, tackling pandemics and other emerging diseases. Fourth, closer economic cooperation and collaboration in science, technology, and innovation can accelerate our economic recovery and growth. In 2020, ASEAN and China became each other's largest trading partner despite the COVID-19 pandemic. We continue to work on implementing the remaining elements under the ASEAN-China Free Trade Area Upgrading Protocol to further enhance our trade relations and promote a stable and predictable business environment. In line with the ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership Vision 2030, ASEAN and China should intensify efforts to deepen economic linkages and grow trade and investment. The signing of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership RCEP in 2020 not only has the potential to expand regional trade and investment and contribute to global economic recovery, but also serves as our clear signal of unwavering support for regional economic integration and the rules-based multilateral trading system. That was indeed a historic, epic moment when it was signed. At the same time, we must together adapt and take advantage of the digital revolution, transforming our societies in an inclusive and sustainable manner. Our collaboration in areas such as 5G, fintech, blockchain, and autonomous technologies must go hand in hand with efforts to strengthen ASEAN centrality in the region's cybersecurity architecture. We could also start discussing how we can lay the groundwork for our cooperation in such areas as genomics, biotechnology, and space exploration, among others, as we look into the future. Fifth, transnational challenges, especially climate change, highlight the need for more collective efforts and closer collaboration. history has shown that we can achieve so much by inclusive collaboration rather than exclusionary competition. As ASEAN and China mark 2021 as the year of sustainable development cooperation, we must deepen our cooperation in concrete programs and projects in key areas, including poverty alleviation, climate change, and environmental protection, disaster prevention and mitigation, and biodiversity conservation through the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, which is located here in the Philippines. In closing, I am heartened that ASEAN-China cooperation has made great strides over the past 30 years in essentially all sectors of our partnership. Still, there is more room for our relations to grow. The Philippines, throughout its country coordinatorship of ASEAN-China dialogue relations, has been working earnestly with China in filling in that room to advance this partnership. The Philippines will continue to support this endeavor in the years to come. Thank you. 谢谢. Salamat po.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your keynote address. Next, allow me to invite His Excellency Luo Jiaohui, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, to present his keynote address. Your Excellency, you may have the screen.
Hello, everyone. Well, good morning to you. Your Excellency Datu Ling Hui, Your Excellency Elizabeth, Som Leader from Philippines. Thank you very much for your very emotional and friendly remarks. And also, Happy Women's Day to Elizabeth and to all the ladies who participate in today's events, of course, including my colleagues, from my left hand to my right hand. Excellency Siddhartha, Som Leader from Indonesia, my very good friend. I have a lot of fresh memory when we both served as our ambassadors in New Delhi. So this is our first meeting online, but anyway, so happy to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gathering online today to kick off the celebration for the 30th anniversary of China-ASEAN dialogue relations. On behalf of the Chinese government, let me start by thanking the Philippine and the Chinese mission to ASEAN and Indonesia's prominent think tank, CSIS, for their very hard working to put this event together. I thank you all to participate in today's function. 30 years ago in 1991, as Datu Ling rightly pointed, the later Vice Premier Chen Chi-chen started the dialogue process with ASEAN partners. At that time, the Cold War just ended. So that means this year is also marks the end of the 30 years anniversary of Cold War. The world was becoming multipolar. Economic integration was picking up speed. Peace and development became the theme of the times. At that time, there were only 6 member countries in ASEAN. Over the past 30 years, both China and ASEAN countries have been totally transformed. China has become a WTO member. It has made remarkable achievements in its reform and opening up. Now, China stands proudly as the world's second largest economy. It has also scored a complete victory in its fight against poverty. ASEAN countries, for their part, have worked hard for communities building, regional economic integration, and integration with all economy. They have achieved outstanding economic and social development. Today, the combined GDP of ASEAN countries is over 3 trillion US bucks, making it the 5th largest economy in the world. It serves as the major engine driving Asia and global economic growth. Over the past 30 years, China and ASEAN cooperation has fully prospered among ASEAN partners. China was the first to join the TAC, the first to negotiate the FTA with ASEAN, and the first to show its support for ASEAN centrality in East Asia regional cooperation. In 2013, President Xi Jinping proposed the building of an even closer China-ASEAN community of shared future. In 2018, China and ASEAN jointly issued the China-ASEAN Strategic Partnership Vision 2030. Over the past 30 years, China and ASEAN countries have supported each other to overcome many difficulties. As our ambassador to UN mission, Ling Xijun rightly points, such kind of difficulties, including the 1997 Asian financial crisis, the 2003 SARS outbreak, the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, and the 2008 global financial crisis. After the outbreak of COVID-19, the two sides have worked together to fight the pandemic, promote growth, and ensure people's livelihoods. Thanks to the leading efforts, the whole East Asia has become an example for the global fight against COVID and a leader in economic recovery. Over the past 30 years, China-ASEAN trade and economic cooperation has boomed. The China-ASEAN FTA, ACFTA, was fully built in 2010, and its upgrading protocol came into effect in 2019. Our bilateral trade volume surpassed $684 billion last year, or almost 80 times higher than that in 1991. China has been the largest trading partner for ASEAN for 12 years in a row. ASEAN overtook the EU to become China's largest trading partner for the first time in history. With the signing of the RCEP, the world's largest free trade area is about to come into being. There has been dynamic cultural exchanges between the two sides. There are over 200 pairs of sister cities, more than 60 million people traveling between the two sides in 2019. About 4,500 flights shuttling between the two sides every week. Of course, this is 2019, before the pandemic. We have been established a number of important platforms for cultural exchanges and flagship projects, including the China-ASEAN Education Cooperation Week and the Asean-China Young Leaders Scholarship. More than 200,000 overseas students are studying on both sides. Chinese universities are teaching all of the 10 official languages of ASEAN countries. 38 Confucius Institutes have been established in ASEAN countries. Over the past 30 years, the two sides have properly managed the differences greatly contributing to regional peace and stability, China and ASEAN countries signed the DOC in 2002. That time, I was on the occasion. Since then, they have worked to enhance dialogue, mutual trust, and cooperation to build the South China Sea into a sea of peace, friendship, and cooperation. Currently, the parties concerned are engaged in close communication about COC consultation. I do agree with Elizabeth's remarks. Both sides want to speed up such kind of consultation. This really shows once again that we have the wisdom and the capability to manage the situation on the South China Sea. The success in China-ASEAN relations is, in my view, attributable to the following factors: mutual respect, treating each other as equals, and staying committed to good neighborliness and friendship. Leaders of both sides have maintained close interactions and strategic communication to chart the course for and guide the development of China-ASEAN relations. The two sides uphold the principle of East Asia cooperation, including consensus building, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, and accommodating each other's comfort level. Focusing on development, mutual benefits, and improving people's livelihoods and well-being. And also understanding each other, learning from each other, and improving the general environment for public support. Excellencies, in the past 30 years, all what we have done has become history, a very glorious history. That means, number one, we will never forget this very glorious history. 30 years, maybe it's a very short time in the whole mankind, but for China-ASEAN relations, dialogue relations, in such kind of short but also longer time, we have done a lot. Secondly, that means we today stand on the shoulder of our forefathers. That means we should do more. We should hard work, pay more, working very hard, and also do more. And also that means, thirdly, we will never forget what our previous generations, our leaders, our people, our SOM leader, officials, coordinated countries, ASEAN Secretariat, for their great contribution to this very important bilateral relations. China and ASEAN are going to co-host a number of celebrations this year for 30 years of dialogue relations. We hope that ASEAN countries will join us to co-host those events and give our relations a very fresh boost. Dear friends, struck by major changes and a pandemic, both unseen in a century, our world is threatened by a global economy recession and growing uncertainty in the international affairs. China always sees ASEAN as a priority in its neighborhood diplomacy. We are willing to work with ASEAN to set up cooperation against the pandemic, upgrade cooperation in public health, and help promote regional economic recovery. At the meantime, we hope to work with ASEAN in taking the opportunity of the 30th anniversary and upgrade our relations. First, new goals should be defined. It's an important consensus between our leaders to build the China-ASEAN strategic partnership. At a higher level, China is willing to make joint efforts with ASEAN to upgrade the relationship for it to continue to lead the East Asia cooperation. Second, new growth drivers should be fostered. China supports the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. We are ready to work with the ASEAN side to carry out cooperation in science, technology, and innovation, strive for digital transformation of the economy and society. We also stand ready to work with the ASEAN side for the early entry into force of the RCEP to give regional cooperation a stronger boost. Chinese side have already ratified the RCEP. Thirdly, new highlights needed to be created. China is ready to jointly implement the ASEAN-China Year of Sustainable Development. We can strengthen cooperation in environmental protection, poverty alleviation, disaster prevention and reduction, climate change, and other areas. As I said before, this year marks the ending of Cold War, 30 years. And also it's the 20 years anniversary of 9/11. That means non-traditional security matters. We must pay more attention and join hands to fight. Especially at current days, the COVID-19 pandemic is still going on. We need to do something more. Also, as Elizabeth rightly pointed, public health cooperation is so important and so urgent. Vaccine and other matters, China we're ready to continue our cooperation with ASEAN member countries. We can promote the implementation of more pro-people projects which are of high standards, sustainable, and good for people's livelihoods. China is willing to further enhance dialogue and communication with ASEAN to jointly promote the building of a blue economy partnership between the two sides. Fourth, major pillars needed to be consolidated. Political and security cooperation is one of the three pillars of China-ASEAN relations. We would push forward strategic communication and dialogue, strengthen cooperation in traditional and non-traditional security areas, jointly oppose Cold War mentality and bloc politics. We are ready to work closely with ASEAN countries to speed up the COC consultations. Dear friends, China will launch its 14th five-year plan this year and further enhance opening up to the outside world, of course, including the ASEAN countries. This will surely bring up even greater opportunities for China-ASEAN cooperation. We have high expectations and we're optimistic for the China-ASEAN relations. Let's work hand in hand to make the next 30 years an even more brilliant for China-ASEAN relations and contribute even more to development and prosperity in the region and beyond. Last but not the least, I wish the event today a big success. Thank you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your keynote address. Last but not least, I am pleased to invite His Excellency Ambassador Sidarto Suryodipuro, Director General for ASEAN Cooperation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Indonesia, to present his keynote address. Your Excellency, you may have the screen.
Your Excellency Dato Lim Jong-hoi, Secretary General of ASEAN, Your Excellency Elizabeth Nguyen Suseso, Senior Official of the Philippines, and my colleague of the Senior Officials to ASEAN, Your Excellency Luo Jiaohui, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of China, and longtime friend and colleague during our days in India, His Excellency Ambassador Zhang, Ambassador of China to ASEAN, His Excellency Noel Zervigon, Permanent Representative of Philippines to ASEAN, and other members of the CPR, former Secretary General Ong Keng Yong, Bapak Yusuf Wanandi, Ambassador Rizal Sukma, all colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, participants to this event. I extend my sincere appreciation to the Chinese mission to ASEAN, the permanent mission of the Philippines to ASEAN, and CSIS Indonesia for inviting me to join the celebration. I value this opportunity to share my thoughts on this important subject of 30 years of ASEAN-China dialogue relations. This kind of celebration is not only about counting numbers or only to reflect on the distance of where ASEAN and China have traveled in the last 30 years. Of course, these matter. ASEAN and China should be reasonably proud of the achievements they have made together to serve their interests and to serve the region's security and prosperity. But this celebration is also important to look at the horizon, to help chart our future, to see where opportunities and potential obstacles lie for a more peaceful and prosperous region. ASEAN-China cooperation is more than just the aggregate bilateral relations between individual ASEAN member states and China. It has become an important force to promote peace, stability, and common prosperity in the region. The past 30 years, as Ambassador Luo had rightly pointed out, was a period marked by globalization, connectivity, and economic growth, where economies were opening borders and had expanded international trade, investment, and people-to-people exchanges. It was a period marked by relative geopolitical predictability, where the major powers and ASEAN's external partners focused more on cooperation rather than their competition. It was a period marked by regional institution building and norms building, led by ASEAN at the forefront and supported by its partners, not least by China. This was a period marked by the strengthening of ASEAN centrality, underlining not only ASEAN's geographical centrality, but also its institutional and diplomatic centrality. China's role, including its accession to the TAC, had significantly contributed to this. Not only has ASEAN provided a regional ecosystem for peace, stability, and prosperity to China's neighborhood, ASEAN and China have also become each other's largest trading partner. Last year, ASEAN became China's #1 trading bloc, with trade volume hitting more than $700 billion. And for its part, China has been ASEAN's largest trading partner for the last 12 years. ASEAN and China have made much progress in the last 30 years, and this relationship has the maturity to deal with the challenges of today and tomorrow. The region's stability and security, based on geopolitical predictability of the last 30 years, can no longer be taken for granted. The rising security dilemma among the great powers and its impact on Southeast Asia is a concern for all of us. Southeast Asian waters is key to the security and prosperity of many countries of the world, not least of China's. More therefore needs to be done to address this dilemma. ASEAN-based mechanisms provide the platform for this. Platforms such as the ARF, the ADMM+, the East Asia Summit, as well as the mechanisms between ASEAN and its dialogue partners. In this case, of particular importance is with China. We know that throughout history, such a security dilemma can only be addressed in a setting where all concerned parties sit around the table, recognize the power dynamics that is taking place, and continue to have a dialogue over matters of concern. Having this in mind, ASEAN adopted the Asean Outlook on the Indo-Pacific as an instrument to ensure continued regional stability and prosperity. It is an instrument based on international law and norms that all of us have agreed to, based on practical cooperation in maritime cooperation, economic cooperation, connectivity, and on achieving sustainable development goals. This is an ASEAN Outlook, and I underline an ASEAN Outlook. ASEAN member states intend to pursue it with the cooperation and support of our partners. The ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific seeks to provide regional stability and security as we have enjoyed in the past 30 years. And in this context, I would also like to underline the principles that Ambassador Luo had set out for this relationship, principles based on mutual respect, equality, and good neighborliness. I think these are principles that all of us in ASEAN can also ascribe to. Also part of our endeavor for regional stability and security is the conclusion of the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea. ASEAN and China have seen progress in the 2 decades, and I refer in particular to the signing of the DOC when Ambassador Luo was in attendance. So was I, with a number of other colleagues attending this event. But more can and needs to be done. Our aspiration for a South China Sea that enjoys freedom of navigation and overflight on the basis of international law, in particular UNCLOS, is an aspiration shared by the rest of the international community. As the world is seeing a rise in protectionism and unilateralism, ASEAN and China can do more to resist it. Continuous effort to ratify and implement the RCEP will be essential to enhance trade and investment in the region. We have to strengthen cooperation in multilateralism. These will similarly be essential to push for a post-COVID-19 economic recovery. Building connectivity is a critical aspect for the future of our cooperation. China's Belt and Road Initiative and the Master Plan of ASEAN Connectivity will be key to our common endeavor for closer economic and broader partnership. And finally, different from 30 years ago, the issues that many of our countries and the world face today can only find resolution through international cooperation. These will be issues that cannot be solved by a country alone within its borders. Issues like food security, energy security, water security, pandemic, environmental preservation, and other cross-border issues related to climate change, economic development, and population growth. These issues will remain with us and will continue to challenge us. It will continue to challenge our cooperation, to challenge us to build closer partnership. We appreciate China's appreciation to and cooperation with ASEAN's effort to fight COVID-19 and building resilient health system. And I believe that what we do today will lay the foundation for greater cooperation to address future challenges, be it pandemics or other issues affecting our citizens' safety and well-being. Today's meeting is an opportunity for ASEAN-China experts to discuss potentials and challenges on the future of the partnership, to explore ways forward and deliver recommendations. I look forward to benefiting from the valuable expertise and insight the participants bring to the table. I wish all of you a successful meeting and a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now enter the main discussion. This part of the event will be divided into 3 separate panels, moderated separately by our distinguished participants. A kind reminder to our moderators to please keep the discussion within 30 to 35 minutes of time. Once a panel has come to a close, I would ask the moderator to return the screen back to the MC so as to enable the MC to introduce the next panel. To kick things off, may I invite Mr. Herizal Hasri, Chief Executive of the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia, to moderate Panel 1, The Experience and Lessons of ASEAN-China Relations During the Past 30 Years. Sir, you may have the screen.
Thank you very much, Gilang. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be able to moderate this panel this morning with very, very excellent speakers. But before that, let me just please allow for me to introduce myself. My name is Herizal Hasri. I'm the Chief Executive of CSIS Malaysia. I've been very grateful to have today with me 3 excellent speakers, as I mentioned, in this panel. First of all, I'd like to give a little bit of a background. As we've already heard this morning, China's relationship with ASEAN is marking its 30 years since the 24th ASEAN Ministerial Meeting in Kuala Lumpur in 1991. By 1996, China has already joined ASEAN as a dialogue partner. Now, China's relationship is extremely of a high value to a lot of the countries within the ASEAN region and ASEAN as whole. For instance, in terms of economic cooperation, China remains ASEAN's largest trading partner and currently holds 4th highest external source of FDI amongst ASEAN dialogue partners. Asean-China FTA has also benefited multiple parties in the unionship with trade amount of up to $479.4 billion US. And this has been, trade ranging from technology, innovations and sustainable R&Ds, ICT and smart cities, so on and so forth. Also, China, as we all know from various data that we have, is the main source of tourism to ASEAN countries. Now, in terms of social-cultural, there's a lot to be said, but I'll leave that to the panelists, obviously, because this relationship between China and ASEAN actually precedes, obviously, the ASEAN Association itself. It has very long historical and cultural sort of like relationship as well. Now, this panel is very interesting because what we're trying to do this morning is to look at the past 30 years and talk about the challenges and experiences and lessons that could be learned from China's relationship with ASEAN. And together with us, we have 3 excellent speakers: Ambassador Ong Keng Yee, who's the Executive Deputy Chairman of the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore. And then we have Dr. Charmaine Misalucha Willoughby, who's an Associate Professor of the La Salle University of Philippines. And then the third speaker is Professor Zhang Ling, who is the President of Institute of International Studies, Shandong University of China. Now, I will basically not do justice if I make short introductions, for all the speakers, because as we know, that they all have very excellent background, but nevertheless, I think it is useful for me to try and introduce them in a very short and succinct way. Ambassador Ong Keng Yee, to begin with, as we all know, was ASEAN's 11th Secretary General between the year 2003 and 2007. And, Ambassador Ong has also served Singapore High Commission as the High Commissioner to India and Ambassador to Nepal. Ambassador Ong also has been diplomatically posted in multiple different countries, including Malaysia, Iran, and Pakistan. Dr. Sharman is an academic and has worked, with and for ASEAN in many different subjects, and has published numerous amounts of scholarly articles on Southeast Asia. She was appointed as US ASEAN Fulbright Fellow at the American University, Washington, DC, before she was appointed as a Fellow for Japanese Studies by the Japan Foundation at Osaka University. And then thirdly, we have Professor Zhang Ling, and we all know Professor Zhang Ling as a stellar and prominent scholar in the academia field. And Professor Zhang, as I mentioned, is currently the Chinese held positions as a director of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Professor of International Economics, Executive Vice President of the Chinese Association of Asia Pacific Studies, and Senior Advisor on Chinese Policy and Foreign Policies. We all know that Professor Zhang's interest includes regional relations in Asia Pacific, specifically on its economic development policy, which is very interesting, personally to me as well. Now, just a little bit of a background. Each speaker will speak for around 10 minutes in this session. And then after that, we will open for question and answers. I think in the interest of time, because I believe there will be a lot of questions in this session, I would encourage all the participants to send your questions to the chat box because, I do not want to be in danger of repeating similar questions. So I will sort of like look at the questions and then I'll try and put them together and post them to the speakers. So without further ado, can I please invite Ambassador Ong Keng Yee to start the session. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Hariza. I hope all of you can hear me. Well, my task is to talk about the past. I think there are plenty of things to say, but I went through my library last night and I found this little thing called the Asean-China 15th anniversary booklet. Yeah, that was in 2006. And today we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China dialogue relations. So time really doesn't wait for any one of us. I have 7 things to say. I will do it quickly so that I'm within your time limit. The first thing I want to say is that looking at the past, I think the economic and trade cooperation between ASEAN and China are the main driving force in our relationship. In the early days, when we first started the ASEAN-China cooperation, there were a lot of discussions and meetings, but I think the most important tactic was to institute the early harvest program. While we were talking, the trade and economic ties could progress and benefits are obtained or were obtained by both sides because of the early harvest program. And today, the ASEAN-China economic relationship is very intensive. I think all ASEAN member states have China as their #1 trading partner presently. Yeah, and ASEAN-China trade exchange has gone up tremendously. And with the COVID-19 situation in 2020, ASEAN has become the #1 trading partner of China. I don't think this will last for this year as the economic situation stabilizes. I think the Chinese trade and economic ties with the other regions will get back to normal. But nevertheless, I think ASEAN is an important trading and investment partner of China. The second thing I want to say is that in the past 30 years, we have extended our ASEAN-China cooperation to many sectors. But I think in contingency and emergency situation, especially in tackling communicable diseases, we have been able to learn from each other more quickly and doing more things together than we would otherwise have been. So, yeah, as my wife keeps saying, only when danger comes at your door, you start to become more cooperative with your neighbors. Yeah, I hope in the next phase of our ASEAN-China cooperation and relationship, we will not wait for danger like communicable diseases to hit us, and then we start intensifying our real cooperation. The info sharing during SARS and now during the COVID-19 pandemic is very important. Yeah. And what is achievable we have done, which is to minimize disruption. And today, ASEAN countries has witnessed more than 12.5 million cases of COVID-19 infection, and more than 55,000 of our ASEAN citizens have died. So going forward, we really must do more to talk to each other, cooperate with each other. But from the past, we learned that health cooperation, dealing with problems across our common borders, will be the driving force for our bilateral ASEAN-China cooperation. The third thing I want to say is that the key takeaway for the last 30 years of our ASEAN-China dialogue partnership is really what the former Chinese Foreign Minister Li Zhaoxing had said in this little booklet that I mentioned to you. Yeah, and he mentioned that our shared goals and responsibilities will remain an inexhaustible source of strength for further growth of relations between ASEAN and China. A few days ago, the current Foreign Minister of China, Mr. Wang Yi, in his media conference in Beijing, talks about really the shared future and the shared vision of ASEAN and China. And this is, I think, the contemporary definition of what will bind the two of us together. Yeah, from the shared goals and responsibilities, we now have a shared vision, a shared future. I want to say that if you look at the relationship that we have and the exchanges that we have between ASEAN and China in the past 30 years, one thing will come out or will jump at you. Yeah, that is that we are always doing polling and surveys and looking at the public opinion of our citizens concerning one another. And my impression is that we have some way to go to have more effective communication and to have more precise messaging so that our elites as well as our ordinary people will not have this problem about worrying about the growth of China and its political and social impact on our respective countries. So I think this is something that we need to think about. Yeah. And going forward, I think the segment that we have later today, our speakers might want to address some of these challenges with regard to more effective and precise communication between ASEAN and China. The thing that is most prominent in the past few years is the situation in the South China Sea. And here, I think we have heard the Secretary General of ASEAN and all the other speakers before me stressing the need for the rule of law, respect and adherence to the existing UN conventions and agreements. And I think the most important thing is for us to have restraint and reduce tension so that we can continue a peaceful and prosperous coexistence as our diplomats and experts sort out the exact situation with regard to how to deal with the South China Sea. And Mr. Wang Yi has said in the media conference a few days ago that the negotiation or the talks on the code of conduct for the South China Sea is progressing steadily. So I go to the next point, which is the most pressing issues as we see it today, but which we have also started working since 2009 in a concerted manner, is on climate change and environment protection. And now we are finishing our latest 5-year cooperation strategy on environment cooperation. I think the assessment is being made, and I hope that our results would show that there is progress, but there is an urgency now with regard to this area of cooperation, and we have to work hard to make sure that we start to be seriously and doing things practically on what we call a circular economy. Yeah. The final thing I want to say is that I want to conclude by stressing 3 things. And that is that we have to continue our confidence building. We have to continue our work on trust enhancing. And we have to remember and always remind ourselves we need to cooperate with each other in the ASEAN-China family, as well as between ASEAN, China, and the rest of the world. So that is multilaterally, we have to continue to work so that our ASEAN-China dialogue partnership will be a value-adding contribution to the multilateral order that we have grown up to know. Thank you very much, Harizal.
Thank you, Ambassador Ong. Thank you for starting the session. I think those are very important points. And I think this brings us nicely, to the second speaker, especially on the 3 main points that Ambassador Ong has highlighted that comes out of the pandemic. With that, I invite Dr. Carmen to present. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And good morning, Your Excellency. Good morning, everybody. I'm grateful to the organizers for involving me in this forum. Strategic partnerships have been in the limelight recently. At a time when challenges of a polycentric world seem daunting, strategic partnerships represent a crucial way to solve global problems. They embrace the idea that partners share similar concerns and objectives, and they cover a wide range of issue areas, thereby making them more comprehensive than the mostly military connotations of alliances. China, in particular, champions this way of conducting international relations. It currently has strategic partnerships with 78 countries and 5 regional organizations. Of particular interest here is China's strategic partnership with ASEAN, which was created in 2003 to foster friendly relations and mutually beneficial cooperation towards long-term regional peace and development. In the international relations literature, strategic partnerships can be seen as a practice of cooperation and can be further broken down to patterned actions that actors within those partnerships do. such as and one good example of this is the practice of holding summits. This practice features prominently in the ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership because summitry is the foundation of the ASEAN-China dialogue relations, which was formally established in 1996 and on which the strategic partnership is built. The ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership forms the overarching framework in which maritime cooperation in the South China Sea is a part of. As a whole, ASEAN's relations with China can be seen as going in the right direction. Milestones have been achieved, particularly in the economic sphere, with the realization of the ASEAN-China Expo in 2004, the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement in 2015, but still, much more needs to be done to address maritime issues. First steps in cooperation in the maritime domain have already been taken. The main ASEAN document on the South China Sea is the 2002 DOC, and it is considered as a milestone document. The DOC is represented as a stepping stone towards a full-fledged code of conduct, as some of us have mentioned earlier. But while initial steps have been taken, the maritime domain remains very, very challenging. The fact that the South China Sea dispute remains unresolved, despite the numerous mechanisms in place, proves to be the most challenging to ASEAN. To be fair, however, ASEAN has more experience in conflict management rather than conflict resolution. Still, the challenge for ASEAN is to agree on a collective response. This is proving to be very difficult, not least because ASEAN is an intergovernmental organization with varying positions, responses, and interests. It is also tough because ASEAN members differ in the way they view the South China Sea dispute. A second challenge steers ASEAN towards more introspection. The organization has often prided itself with a series of principles that have come to be collectively known as the Asean Way. These principles put a premium on sovereignty and the attendant non-interference in member states' domestic affairs, as well as the decision-making procedures based on consultation and consensus. The ASEAN Way became the basis for claims that ASEAN has been able to successfully engage with and socialize China into joining various multilateral forums. The success of this so-called complex engagement, however, is due less to the ASEAN Way and more to China's own emphasis in diplomacy and embrace of multilateralism as an attempt to redefine its position in international relations. Hence, it is logical to posit that ASEAN's inability to come up with a common position in the South China Sea dispute may be due to the rather dated principles that have remained unchanged despite the geopolitical complexities that have developed since 1967. The bottom line is that the ASEAN Way, and therefore ASEAN centrality, is not just wavering, but it is also waning and perhaps even unraveling. The third challenge or lesson that we could learn from 30 years of the relationship complicates ASEAN-China relations in the South China Sea in the sense that there is a role that extra-regional factors play here. The non-issuance of a joint communique at the end of the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting in Phnom Penh in July 2012 is symptomatic of intra-ASEAN divisions that are fueled by extra-ASEAN pressure. Another incident puts a spotlight on extra-regional factors. The ASEAN-China Special Foreign Ministers meeting in Kunming in June 2016 had a rather tumultuous ending as Malaysia released and then retracted a media statement that voiced out serious concerns about the South China Sea. In sum, the regional and international environment in which the ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership operates in pressure both sides to ensure and maintain good relations with each other. Their geographic proximity serves to remind them that they cannot afford to not be on each other's good side. The strategic partnership writ large serves as an overarching framework that incorporates multifaceted areas of cooperation. But upon closer analysis, reveals the amount of work that still needs to be ironed out in the maritime domain in particular. The ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership needs to deal with this head-on by not compartmentalizing it and instead treating it as inextricably linked to others. In other words, failing to realize the connectivity of the South China Sea issue within the totality of the ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership will only make the relationship less effective, and that is something that we should all avoid. So I'll stop here because my time is almost up, and I look forward to our Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Charmaine, and thank you for that very nice sort of like, opening or introduction, because obviously we're going to discuss about it a little bit more during the Q&A about some of the challenges that, ASEAN and China faces, especially when it comes to the South China Sea. This brings us to the third panelist, Professor Zhang, and I'd like to give the floor to Professor Zhang, not to waste time, because I think there's a lot that can be shared from him as well. The floor is yours, sir. Professor, you are still muted. Sorry.
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. In summarize of China-ASEAN 30 years dialogue, my emergent idea is how to summarize. I call it cooperation as a new civilization, the real value of China-ASEAN dialogue. Why China-ASEAN? The first, that is we are close neighbor. And we suffered from bad relationship. We have benefited from the good relationship. So that is first, I think, is most important lesson. The post-Cold War present a new chance for China-ASEAN to open the dialogue to create a better relationship. Among all the factors that make China-ASEAN closer, the most important thing that is our shared belief that a dialogue and cooperation makes us better. Today, after 30 years dialogue, we have generally become a reliable partners based on the comprehensive cooperation. We have the shared understanding and confidence. We should and we can continue this trend, and especially in facing of this complex situation and many challenges, dangers we have to handle, not between our two sides, but also in the larger region and the world. So to summarize our experience, the first thing, I think, dialogue as a value for us. So as we have differences, only dialogue can enhance our understanding that helps to reduce tensions and nurture cooperation. So that is not true for all the neighbors. So, but China-ASEAN keep for dialogue for 30 years. There are two big challenges I mentioned by some previous speaker that for China-ASEAN relations. The first one, many mentioned the disputes in South China Sea area. Although many disputes, we have insisted dialogue and made efforts to search the appropriate way to handle this very complex, vulnerable issue in order to avoid confrontation. So we made DOC, we are working for COC, and many other efforts. The second, that is distrust. in facing a complex situation, we managed to improve the understanding with the confidence and never to give up. Though we have had the problems in the past, some tensions, but we did not give up our confidence to continue the dialogue. So I call this dialogue as a value for us. The second experience that mutual respect as a culture. So that is, again, it's not true for all the neighbors as a culture. So China, ASEAN recognize and respect the diversity and mutually respect the other side's interests and concerns. We share the common principle of sovereignty, independence, non-interference, and so on. So China is the first to sign TAC adopted by ASEAN, except WTO by multilateralism, and China joined it, signed it. But the regional one, this is really this TAC adopted by ASEAN. China first signed it. That shows in China respect that ASEAN's principles. So China always support ASEAN centrality principle and leading and coordinating role in the regional arrangements like ASEAN Plus, RCEP, ARF, and etc. So ASEAN also supports China's big role in regional as well as global initiatives and contributions like BRR, AIIB, and many others. So that's the second experience I summarize as the mutual respect as a culture. The third experience, I think, I call it cooperation as a foundation. Dialogue is to nurture the cooperation spirit and opportunity. So China, ASEAN innovated FTA by China, ASEAN, mentioned by Ambassador Wong. So I personally deeply involved the process. It was not easy start, but we found a way how to create ASEAN with China, ASEAN characters, and seriously considering the real situation and fact and concerns from two sides. So gradual, step by step, more time for less developed members, early harvest arrangement, progressive updates, and so on. So this is not a traditional, mainstream FTA at that time, but we made it, and seems it's successful now. And we have the close cooperation and BRR building, though there are some suspicions, arguments, but we are cooperating well until now. So China, ASEAN have become the principal economic partner in the trade and investment with this kind of, foundation, cooperation. So the key for Asean Way is the cooperation spirit, which nurtures the new civilization of cooperation against the so-called strategic competition by taking the other side as a rival. The cooperation as a new civilization, that is a top topic I taught in January in Shanghai Forum. It seems make many people to think in our complex world, because they're full of confrontations and ideological divisions. But I think this cooperation as a new civilization against this new trend is very important. So three experiences I summarize is a value, as a culture, as a foundation, and especially for cooperation as a new civilization for our region and also for the world. The challenges: we are living in a new era of grand transformation with complex and uncertain environment and situation, and COVID-19 epidemic and the related impacts may be longer than we think. Speeding climate change may be faster than we think. So American decoupling of actions against China with a strategic and technologistic doctrine may be out of control. So increasing populism, extremism, and protectionism. So we are living, in a different world compared to the past several decades. So we have to handle this. It is essential for China ASEAN to continue our dialogue and cooperation that helps to meet and handle the challenges, and especially to prevent the reappearance of confrontation in our region and the world. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we really have the real danger and the world and move to a divided one. So for instance, we have a so-called Indo-Pacific exclude China. We have a court security arrangements against China. So, it's very important for ASEAN, as announced in this Indo-Pacific statement, and to keep as a, it's a role to embracing and balancing and help the region and the world to a more integrated and cooperative one rather than divided one. So China, ASEAN, if continue cooperate and to make our region stable and prosperous, that's very crucial. That's what we did in the past. And we hope we can do it better in the future. Thank you, Chairman. I stop here.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. That's really interesting because I think the two main points that was mentioned, we should always remember and bring it back into this conversation later, which is basically the diversity of ASEAN and the differentiation in terms of how to manage different partners while maintaining dialogue and cooperation for the future, as well as the other, I think, key point is really the ever sort of like dividing world, or it seems to be dividing world, and how ASEAN can play a role to sort of like balance this. Now, I'd like to make a little bit of an announcement. The question and answer session will come at the end of all the sessions today. But again, I will be helping the MC in terms of putting questions together if it's useful, but please do send your questions and the MC will gather them up, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end of all sessions today. Now, I would like to thank you all the three speakers for introduction, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions that will come by from the remarks that you have made. Now back to the MC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heriza Hasri, and all the panelists of panel 1 for an excellent first panel. We will now move on to panel 2, Elevation of ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership to a Higher Level. I would like to invite my esteemed colleague, Ms. Jane Chan, Senior Fellow and Coordinator of the Maritime Security Program at RSIS, to moderate the panel. Ms. Chan, you may have the screen.
Thank you very much, Gilang. A very good day, one and all. A privilege to be participating in this important event. We have heard in the preceding panel a rather comprehensive review of the last 30 years of the ASEAN-China relations, and then, of course, reminded that there are challenges, but also with some really good suggestions on the next step forward. We also heard during the opening remarks and the keynote addresses that there is definitely room for these set of relations to grow. So in this second panel, we have with us three very distinguished speakers, well known in ASEAN, China, and beyond, who will share with us their thoughts on the elevation of the ASEAN-China strategic partnership to a higher level. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read out bios, but simply to introduce them as first, Mr. Kavi Chongkitavon, Senior Fellow at the Chulalongkorn University. Second, we have Dr. Kwek Chik Sui, Associate Professor at the National University of Malaysia. And last but not least, Dr. Yang Yue, Associate Professor and Deputy Director at the Institute of Asian Studies from the China Foreign Affairs University. Without further ado, Kun Kavi, your 10 minutes starts now.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your introductions. It's a big honor to be part of this panel discussion because as a journalist for the past nearly 4 decades, I have followed China-ASEAN relations for the past 30 years. And I have to say, if there is a new vaccine that ASEAN and China can develop. I hope we can use this vaccine to cure all the deep-root mutual suspicion that can overcome all metrics of redundancy, metrics of mistrust, and all others. That's my first point. I think it's very important now that ASEAN has entered a very critical time, because ASEAN-China has developed so well, as our previous panelists have mentioned and point out. It's covered the whole gamut of all the relations. I would like to emphasize that ASEAN and China have more than 44 committees, one of the most extensive relation among all the 10 dialogue partners. And mind you, if you look at the statement from 2003 in Bali, when ASEAN China become a strategic partner, there is a special phase that describes the nature of the ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership. The full name is Asean-China Strategic Partnership for Peace and Security. And at this particular moment, ASEAN is considering whether to upgrade, to alleviate this very important strategic partner to a new plateau. It will be the so-called comprehensive strategic partnership. Of course, comprehensive meaning will depend on the CPR and ASEAN's. At the moment, as I said earlier, I hope that we have a vaccine that can cure all our fears and others to overcome two issues. Of course, we have the issue of COC, and I hope that, like Premier Li Keqiang said, that the COC should be complete within 3 years, and this year, second readings of the single draft has been slow. Of course, everybody understood due to the COVID-19. But I would use the same argument that because of the COVID-19, ASEAN and China should think of ways to overcome the so-called, physical presence, whether through whatever means. Of course, they have tried teleconference, but what is the most important is that the trust level of ASEAN and China have not yet reached the levels to complete this much awaited COC. And I hope under the coordinating countries, the Philippines, progress will be made further, and also under the chair of Brunei. I think that's the hope, because we still have time this year. Of course, COC is not the only challenges. The second challenge is equally important. That is the future of China relation within the ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific. I will discuss later what we need to do in this case. At the moment, China has still been reluctant to support fully, wholeheartedly. This is something that I was very disappointed as someone that have followed China-ASEAN relation for the past 30 years. I remember covering ASEAN-China relation for the first 2 decades. Everything about China was excellent. We talk about China first signatories to the Treaty of Amity, first overall free trade agreement, and many other first. That kind of commitments at the time, ASEAN fully welcome with no reservation. as the ASEAN-China relation entered the second diamond, the so-called diamonds stage, the second 25 year, we are celebrating 30th anniversary. There's a lot of doubts, suspicions, case by case consideration. I thought that when China said that we would like to alleviate our bilateral relations, strategic relation to comprehensive, it should be automatically yes, without any reservation, given all our panelists' discussion for the past 30 years. But that was not the case. Why? Because there are a lot of distractions after the ASEAN-China relation ended the second 25th year cycle. So we need to eliminate or whatever distraction you have, China, US, trade war, the implications, the changing, the shift of a strategic environment, whatever you can say that it all fit in, it's all impact our ASEAN-China relation. And I think it's about time now. China need to take a careful consideration and study, as I think Director of ASEAN Department of Indonesia has said that AOIP is an instrument to increase cooperation and promote peace and stability. And ASEAN will never have any framework that will undermine its cooperation with external power, only to strengthen it, only to bring it together. And in this case, I think China have to reconsider, despite China sort of a dislike of the concept of Indo-Pacific. And Indo-Pacific is not the Western concoction. We ASEAN also discuss and we have described using the word Indo-Pacific. So these two challenges, we have to finish the COC as we have pledged to do all along. That will be one very strong signal. And secondly, I think the AOIP, China need to reconsider and give much stronger support. Of course, there are other issues I will not highlight here because our panelists have mentioned. You look at the most amazing ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership Vision 2030. You have all the details of cooperation, but we need to do 39 of them in all. I love the most about part of cooperation in aging because I'm getting old. You know, it's very important that these two challenges have been addressed this year. And I think after that, ASEAN strategic partner relation with China will be the matter of what you call a morning breeze. It should be alleviated. Finally, the biggest problems that still exist, which no one would like to discuss, is that ASEAN and China lack its own indigenous narrative. We have dialogue, but we don't have narrative of our own. Outsider, whenever there is an issue, create headlines for us to discuss and we follow. We must, after all this year, our relations have reached the point that we must have our own indigenous narrative that describe China-ASEAN relation. And of course, it will depend on our media, academia, policy maker, how they would work together, because so far we still fail. This failure have undermined our close relation that we hope will give us the so-called 100% outcome. I will stop here. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Khun Kavi. You reminded us once again that one of the key challenges between ASEAN-China relations is indeed the lack of trust and confidence. And you suggested that there are areas where more effort can be invested into for mutual understanding. Of course, I do hope that during the Q&A we will have more time to explore your suggestion of having a ASEAN-China indigenous narrative. With that, I would like to give the floor to Professor Quick. Professor Quick, you have 10 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Jane, Madam Chairperson, and a very good morning and also good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for having me here, and very glad to see many friends and also familiar faces, even from this very little screen. And I'm glad particularly also to speak right after my good friend, Khun Kavi. And we are all tasked by the organizers to speak about elevation of ASEAN-China strategic partnership. And my first reaction when I received the instruction was that I think I'm optimistic, although cautiously so. I would elaborate the cautious part perhaps towards the end, even though they were already alluded by Kavi and also early on Ambassador Ong Keng Yong and other ASEAN speakers. But let me, for the next 8 minutes or so, let me highlight the reasons why I'm optimistic that ASEAN-China strategic partnership will be elevated in the coming years. And since we are now celebrating the 30th anniversary of the strategic partnership, and I would of ASEAN-China relations, and in the spirit also by what mentioned by our MC Gilang. I remember early on he invited everybody to raise 3 fingers. So in that spirit, let me organize my optimism. Why the reasons of why I'm optimistic along mainly 3 particular points. Although I think we can have a long list of optimism, even cautious optimism in our own way. And the 3 points are what I would call as 3 I's of number 1, about institutions, number 2, infrastructure, and number 3, interdependence. And let me, before I elaborate each of the 3 points, let me say a few words generally to frame these 3 points in general, in a sense that clearly they are interrelated. And we also should see these as building blocks or platform for ASEAN-China interactions since the early 1990s. And for example, we know that institutions would help deepening the interdependence and also allow for infrastructure collaboration at the bilateral and multilateral level. So there are all building blocks, and when we are seeing that, we also need to bear in mind that they are happening at different time. One leads to another. And this is a case where we can see that these 3 I's are not just about reasons for optimism. There are actually also reasons for caution, in the sense that things might go wrong. One thing will lead to another. And then we know that although the 3 are mutually reinforcing, but if things are going wrong, say in terms of infrastructure institutions, we know that they would also dilute or reduce the level of interdependence. Yeah. So let me go one by one. And then the first point, very briefly, the first point about institutions, by that I'm referring that as a process of institutionalization. Institutionalization process of trying to convert and also transform what would otherwise be ad hoc or tentative collaboration into something that are regular. And this is the one, I think, the most important feature of ASEAN relations. Because if you compare ASEAN's relations with many other dialogue partners, I would say that ASEAN-China relations is perhaps the most institutionalized collaboration and dialogue relations among all. And then the story, of course, started from 1991. I think we heard from our earlier speakers, including the video that it started when Qian Qi-chun was invited to ASEAN meetings as the guest of Malaysian government. And that leads to many more institutionalized processes. So there are a few things that we could learn from the institutionalization process of between China and also ASEAN. But one key thing is that there is a bilateral multilateral synergies, in the sense that when individual ASEAN countries are very enthusiastic in engage China, that would spill over to the China-ASEAN cooperation. And of course, you can say that vice versa is true. So there is a bilateral, multilateral interactions within the institutionalization, but there are also other aspects that we can learn from China-ASEAN institutionalization, in the sense that institutionalization of ASEAN-China is not just about ASEAN-China dialogue process, but it's a multiple layers dynamics. We know that in addition to ASEAN Plus One, there are multiple ASEAN Plus mechanisms which China and ASEAN interact in many ways. So we would say the ASEAN-led institutions, ARF, ASEAN Plus 3, EAS Summit, ADMM Plus, so on and so forth, are clearly main platform that involve both China-ASEAN dialogue interactions. And then that we should also bear in mind what happened over the last few years. Institutionalization between China and ASEAN is not just about ASEAN-led institutions, but increasingly, because of China's growing power and activism, we have also seen the China-led institutions, both at regional and sub-regional level. Lan Chang Mekong institution is one example, but we also know that Bianga is another things that China has in mind, let alone all those AIIBs and so forth. So all these are clearly good and also bad for ASEAN perspective, in the sense that it might add one additional layers for interaction, but it might also have impact for ASEAN-led or ASEAN centrality, and also ASEAN inclusivity, which is why I mentioned that I'm cautiously optimistic. So that's about institutionalization. About infrastructure, we know that this is something that related very much to Belt and Road and all that. But we have to bear in mind that when it talks about infrastructure cooperation between China and ASEAN, it's not just about China push. In fact, what is being overlooked over the years by many observers, even outside of the region, is that ASEAN as small countries pulls China. In fact, China is one of the main active actors to react to ASEAN's invitation. Singapore Kunming ruling, for example, 1996 was very much proposed by Malaysia, ASEAN countries in the platform of ASEAN interaction, and it's not proposed by China. So infrastructure clearly is a continuity of what happened during the 1990s. Belt and Road added to the additional layers, either bilateral but also multilateral elements, which reminds me of something more recent. I think Brunei, as the chair of ASEAN, has recently proposed, I thought that is very interesting proposal, to say that perhaps CIDCA, China International Development Cooperation Agency, some call it as Chinese JICA, should establish offices in all ASEAN countries. And to me, that's an interesting evidence of the dynamic of ASEAN-China cooperation, both over the institutional part, but also on infrastructure, which leads me to my third and also final point about interdependence. And interdependence is not just about economic interdependence. There are multiple forms of interdependence. For example, the health interdependence. We are now in COVID era. And I think health interdependence, China would like to call it as the health Silk Road, to me is perhaps the most important form of interdependence one could have across borders, national boundaries, definitely among proximate neighbors between China and ASEAN. And then there are also other forms of interdependence, for example, the technological interdependence. So all these different forms of interdependence clearly add dynamics for more cooperation and also interaction between China and also ASEAN countries. But we also need to bear in mind that things go both ways. The other side of interdependence is about dependency. And then I think this is something that all ASEAN countries have in mind. We are clearly ambivalent about the growing dynamic of ASEAN-China cooperation being elevated, but elevated to which direction, elevated to what outcomes and what processes, clearly is in the back of everybody's mind. Kun Kawi early on mentioned about the possible direction of elevating the existing ASEAN-China strategic partnership to comprehensive strategic partnership. This, I think, is a clear example of why ASEAN countries are very ambivalent in the sense that we welcome when cooperation and partnership is being elevated, but we are also concerned about the impact this might lead to ASEAN inclusivity, ASEAN centrality, or even unity. And how would this affect our relationship and also a partnership with other dialogue partners? So I would end my presentation by saying that, yes, I'm very optimistic. ASEAN-China strategic partnership will be elevated. And I would like to think that it will happen, just a matter of time. But also I like to think that it's not going to be just one set of comprehensive strategic partnership, but there will be multiple set of comprehensive strategic partnership. With that, I will end my presentation. Back to you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Professor Quek. The 3I suggestion is indeed, to me, a very neat way for us to unpack the very intricate layers of ASEAN-China relationship, highlighting what has worked well so far, but of course also teasing out where more work needs to be done. And then your mention at the end about ASEAN centrality is indeed, the elephant in the room very often in how ASEAN thinks about its relations with partners and friends. With that, I would now like to invite Professor Yang Yue. Professor, you have 10 minutes as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, good morning. First, allow me to thank organizers for the invitation. I feel very honored to attend such an important conference. Actually, it's my second time to Jakarta Forum. So very delighted to be part of it again. And the topic for the second panel is elevating ASEAN-China strategic partnership to a higher level. And Chinese Premier Li Keqiang proposed to elevate ASEAN-China relations to a comprehensive one. In his speech at 23rd China-ASEAN Summit last November. And at the summit, actually two sides agree in principle on bringing the relations to new heights. But just now, the previous speakers, as we all heard, there's still some questions and also doubts. But I personally believe, my personal view, it is a good timing and it is a great necessity for both sides to upgrade the relations. So I wish to take this chance to share my personal understandings on why. I want to talk about 2 points. One is necessity, and second is its implications. Well, firstly, why is necessary? Also 2 points on this. A, it's of great necessity to build mutual trust for the time being. And according to what previous speakers said about the challenges still existing between two sides, and also according to the latest survey report released by ASIS Yusof Ad Hoc Institute, Southeast Asian countries have more doubts about the strategic intentions of China as compared with the result of previous 2 years, even though they identify China as the biggest contributor to the regional pandemic combat and regional development. So to me, it's a sad story. It also shows the trust is still a knotty problem between both sides. As we all know, it's natural for ASEAN members to be anxious about its neighbor with big expansion and rapid growth. However, it's also a fact that China has always been committed to maintaining the peace and development of the region with ASEAN members throughout the way to become the second economy in 2010 and from then on. I think this is a strong testament of its peaceful rise. But with still more anxieties coming from Southeast Asian countries in recent years, it's a great necessity for both to face it and tackle it. And China's proposal to elevate relations, I think, can help solve this problem to a great extent. And China's proposal shows a very good gesture in terms of China attaching great importance to its relations with ASEAN. and a strong and consistent commitment to further deepening and broadening bilateral cooperation in an all-around manner, which is, I think, China's reassurance, strategic reassurance to ASEAN members as well. And it could help ease the apprehensions of Southeast Asian countries. And more importantly, trust can be built and solidified throughout deeper and broader cooperation. And B, it's a great necessity to maintain the momentum of relations growth and build a sustainable one. As previous speaker mentioned, I summarize 3 I's, I fully agree. But what distinguishes comprehensive strategic partnership from strategic partnership is just one word, comprehensive. And this word means large scope and great details. And when parties want to enter into the partnership of this sort, they not only need to show their strong commitments to long-term and healthy development of relations in all-dimensional, multi-level, and wide-ranging manner, but also need to map out plans in great details. They must be very clear on their objectives. And the objective is a stretch, so they are more motivated to achieve what's planned. So actually what strikes me most is that both sides, ASEAN and China, have always been forward-looking and strongly committed to long-term development of relations. And China-ASEAN Strategic Partnership Vision 2030 is a very good case in point. In that document, the medium-term and long-term objectives are set. And also in that document, both sides agree in principle to, I quote, to advance China-ASEAN strategic partnership to new heights. So it clearly shows that both sides are forward-looking and have very clear goals and goodwills about their future relations. And this is extremely important for both sides at the moment as well, since we still have lingering challenges and problems, as previous speakers already said. And since the establishment of ASEAN-China Strategic Partnership in 2003 and dialogue relations in 1991, and remarkable achievements on all fronts have been made. And this is also a testament of growing maturity and stability of bilateral relations. And comprehensive strategic partnership is a good summary of the status quo. And both sides also need to look forward and consider how to make sound bilateral relations sustainable. And currently, on many issues, both sides are already on the right track, right? Such as ongoing COC negotiations, the signing of RCEP, and cooperation on pandemic combat. But when we continue to face, the lingering and new problems, much higher goals and more detailed plans and much better solutions to the problems are needed at the moment to help both sides to keep on the right track and steer the right direction. So in this sense, partnership of this sort, I think, is conducive to sustaining healthy and strong bilateral relations and help us achieve more fruitful results. And secondly, what implications this relations elevation will have, both strategically and practically. And some argued that this relations upgrading means China first, and is sort of balancing act against the US, and it's a tilt toward the regional giant. But I would argue to the contrary. 3 reasons for this. A, comprehensive strategic partnership is purely a move to build close ties between both sides in all dimensions of relations. And B, partnership of this sort is by nature constructive instead of exclusive. It's not type of cooperation among alliances targeting the third party. And choosing sides is not DNA of ASEAN members, and China has no intention to push ASEAN to do it either. And C, China first is not new in the history of ASEAN, developing its relations with external powers. So if we examine the development of ASEAN's relations with external powers, we'll find China has been always playing a leading role in developing and strengthening its relations with ASEAN. And by doing so, can China contribute more to regional development, thereby encouraging others to upgrade their relations with ASEAN and deepen their cooperation with ASEAN? As many keynote speakers and previous speakers mentioned again and again, China enjoys many firsts with ASEAN. So I will not repeat here. And as for its specific implications on ASEAN-US relations, I will argue that this elevation will push the US to come much closer with ASEAN and make ASEAN more strategically important and relevant to the US, since it worked in the history when Obama administration signed TAC and became EAS member in 2010, which is perceived by Southeast Asian academia to be a product of the US feeling encouraged by the demonstrative role of China. And since 1977, ASEAN has pursued proactive engagement with outside world, and such engagement benefits ASEAN as it positions the grouping as the hub of the regional settings and helps to uphold ASEAN centrality and buttress ASEAN multilateralism. And ASEAN today is continuing to do so. And last year, ASEAN and Canada agreed to lift their dialogue relationship to strategic partnership. And Cuba, South Africa, and Colombia signed TAC. So this time regarding ASEAN-China relations elevation, don't wait and see until all existing problems are resolved. And more importantly, I think it will help us to solve the existing problem, and both will benefit under the partnership of this sort. And ASEAN's overall external relations is expected to be lifted to new heights as well. Okay, let me stop here, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yang Yue, for the level-minded assessment on what is essential in the ASEAN-China partnership. After hearing all three panelists, I hear the same words and terminology of trust, of confidence, of cooperation, of partnership. But I have to admit that I'm not entirely convinced that there is actually a meeting of mind at the moment in terms of what a common vision is in this partnership and relations and how we can get there. But I'll leave this difficult task to the next panel on the way forward. So with that, please join me in thanking the three panelists for their short remarks, and we will hear from them again during the Q&A. Back to you, Gilang, please.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you to all the panelists for a very sharp second panel. Our last panel of the event, panel 3, The Way Forward, will be moderated by Professor Zhang Yunling, Academy member of CAS and the president of the Institute of International Studies of Shandong University. Professor, you may have the screen.
Yeah, hello. Let me chair this panel. The subject is the way forward. We have three speakers. Dr. Rizal Sukma, ambassador to Britain, an old friend of Center for Strategic International Studies, Indonesia. Dr. Nhu Hong Song, the Vice President of Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, and Ambassador Xu Bu, the President of China Institute of International Studies. So time limit, please keep your time. Now let's start by Dr. Sukma, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Zhang Yunling. It's very good, to be back, and it's great to be on the panel with so many old friends and discuss. I think this is very important aspect of ASEAN-China relation. What are we going to do and expect in the future? So let me begin by expressing my gratitude and thanks to the statement by Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently, I think 2 or 3 days ago, that China would work very closely with Indonesia to ensure that vaccine needs in Indonesia is fulfilled, and also the willingness of China to support Indonesia to become a vaccine production center in Southeast Asia. And I believe that China has also extended the same support to all ASEAN members on this particular undertaking. This, of course, suggests what to be expected, in ASEAN-China relations as we move forward to the next 30 years and beyond in our relationships. The intensifications of cooperation that benefits not only state-to-state relations, not only the state itself, but more importantly, the people. So that should be, I think, the focus, of our cooperation for the next 30 years and beyond, and how that we can pull all the resources so that we can deliver, to the benefit of the people to both on both sides, whenever we cooperate on. So that is why moving forward, we can no longer work in a business as usual way. So I think we need new ways to address the following challenges, in our bilateral relations. First and foremost, we need to continue to strengthen the foundations of trust, in ASEAN-China relations. Like Jen, just mentioned, I think this, has been discussed, in the last two panels. So we have to be honest that this trust issue remains a challenge, for both sides. Both sides need to develop a new way of dialogue that facilitate us to examine all issues and find ways to resolve them in a spirit of friendship. Working to find solutions on the South China Sea is critical to this. So there is a need to move faster and accelerate the process. So we need to demonstrate that ASEAN and China can work on this. So the agreement on the South China Sea will also boost ASEAN credibility. Second, we need to focus on how ASEAN countries can better benefit from economic cooperation with China. So we hope, for example, that China can help ASEAN countries to gain better access to China's market. We also hope that China can help ASEAN to boost its manufacturing capacity so that we can also access other international markets with China's support. And third, China should also be assured that ASEAN has no appetite to take side in the growing Sino-American rivalry. So we will continue to stick to our policy of maintaining our strategic autonomy. In order to ensure our centrality, which requires unity and capacity, we appreciate China's support to ASEAN centrality. And we also convinced that close and deep cooperation with China will strengthen ASEAN capacity in turn. And fourth, China and ASEAN should also work closely to address common regional problems. So the case of Myanmar, for example, is just the latest example. And China's support for ASEAN's role is greatly appreciated. And China and ASEAN can work together to explore ways to resolve the crisis. China's role in managing and resolving regional issues is critical. That would be an area for closer cooperation between ASEAN and China in the years to come. Now, simply because our strategic objectives are the same. First, to create a conducive environment for cooperation, and second, to maintain peace and stability, and third, of course, to create prosperity. So as the challenges are becoming more complex, because the world has been changing and will continue to change since especially the departure of President Trump, both ASEAN and China need to take a fresh look at our relationships. For that, a vision group idea has been proposed by CSIS and also a number of think tanks in China, so that we can start thinking about how we can renew our efforts to move forward together and explore more effective ways to cooperate in the future. So I think I just stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You saved some time. And next speaker is Vice President Nguyen, please, from Vietnam.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Again, it's an honor for me to be part of this discussion. I enjoyed the previous commentators very much, and I've learned a lot from it. Now, my task is to chart the way forward for ASEAN-China's relation, which I would like to limit to the 10 years time span, because in today's changing world, a vision longer than 10 years, it's very difficult to make. Now, the next 10 years in ASEAN-China relations, I think, is going to be very different from the last 30 years in our relationship, because the nature of the relationship, the nature of ASEAN-China's relations will be very different, and so will also be the regional and international environment. China doubled its GDP over the last 10 years, and its GDP will likely also nearly double for the next. Its GDP per capita will also double in the next 10 years. China will surpass the US to be the #1 economy in the world in the next 10 years. China is already now the largest naval force on earth, and over the next 10 years, China is likely going to build a largest force, largest multidimensional force, and become the world leading or world #1 military power. China has already set its goal to be such power by 2027 at the 100th anniversary of the People's Liberations Army. ASEAN likewise is going to also see great leap forward in the next 10 years also. By 2030, ASEAN will be the third most populous economy and is projected to become the 4th largest economy in the world by 2030. In terms of domestic consumptions alone, ASEAN's domestic consumption is going to contribute to 60% of its GDP's growth, and the population is going to jump to 700 million also. ASEAN is going to contribute to its labor force growth, whereas China's labor force is likely to shrink in the next 10 years. That is to say that ASEAN and China are increasingly becoming important partners of each other, and we will be sharing the Asian century together in close neighborhood. Before China offers the concept of a community of common destiny, we already recognized and knew that our future are intertwined. ASEAN-China will be more connected than ever before, both digitally, economically, and also in terms of human connections. The region, Asia Pacific, is going to draw plenty of attention internationally, and countries around the world is going to want to cooperate with us and cooperate with this region. Now, that vision of the future brings us challenges as well as opportunities. As we grow, and we'll be growing fast, there'll be certainly more competition over the limited resources and space. And we'll have to face that reality and have to handle that peacefully. And there'll be more cooperation between ASEAN and China, but there'll be naturally more insecurity within Southeast Asia. That is just natural, and we'll have to live with that. And ASEAN and China's, whatever its interactions, this region is going to face or is going to receive more attention, but as well as more scrutiny as to how we handle things and how we conduct and we go about doing our business. So what I'm trying to say is that more interactions will happen between ASEAN and China in the next 10 years or so than the last 30 years between our two countries or region. ASEAN-China relationship will become multifaceted and comprehensive, regardless of how we are going to call or what we are going to call the relationship. So it is important that we have that vision of the future and have the correct expectation on one another. I hope that China will expect and understand that Southeast Asia will continue to reap the opportunities of an Asian century, but it will also feel insecure and will find ways to address its insecurity. China also needs to understand that while ASEAN is coming closer to China, China cannot expect ASEAN or China to be the only way of ASEAN. ASEAN will always diversify its relationship and have friends with other countries on the world. So I'd like to offer 5 areas where we need to work together as a way forward. First of all, the trust issue. We need to build stronger political trust, not only between the leaders, but also between the people. And I'd encourage both ASEAN and Chinese people to look at things on or from the other's perspective, or to say differently, to be on the other's shoes to understand how we look at things from the other side. Secondly, we need to be more sensible on one another's issues or sensitivities. And I've heard previous speakers mentioning the South China Sea or the Mekong and so on. On the code of conduct, I think that is the way to go. But aside from the diplomatic efforts that we are all putting to advance the process, I think there are even need to be greater efforts on the ground so that not only the diplomats are leading the conversation, but also the people who are actually making things happen on the ground are also on board. And I think it would be nice, since every leaders in the region have mentioned the code of conduct when they talk about the COC. I hope that President Xi also mentioned the COC when he refers to the South China Sea. The next time he talks about the subject. Now, we also need to work together on tackling new challenges, such as the digital economy, the blue or green economy, and we must lead in building new norms in this new front. And aside from that, we also have to work together to strengthen existing norms, and norms that we've been talking a lot about, such as international law, work together to narrow the gap of understanding and interpretation of conventions, such as the Conventions on the Law of the Sea, work together to strengthen and promote multilateralism, as well as international institutions, such as the UN or the WTO and so on. We also need to work together to engage extra-regional stakeholders who will recognize that will not go away simply. They will be and will always be a part of the network of interactions in this region. And we can do so through the support of the ASEAN centrality and the ASEAN institutions. The more ASEAN centrality or ASEAN institutions can play its role, the less there will be other multilateral institutions of our dislike. And lastly, I should suggest that we work together to promote practical cooperations on a number of issues. Of immediate need at the moment is the post-COVID recovery. We can work on harmonized vaccine certification, for example, to facilitate post-COVID travel resumptions. We can work on connectivity infrastructure projects, which our previous speakers mentioned, or cybersecurity and tackling transnational crimes on the cyberspace, or science, technology, health, biology, environment, climate change. These are all practical sectoral areas where opportunities to cooperate for cooperation is fertile, and areas where practical cooperation can take place. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Then now, Ambassador Xu, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really happy, to be back to ASEAN, and I remember vividly, my days when I was, Chinese ambassador to ASEAN. Yes, it's such an important event for us to be here to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Asean-China dialogue relation. As many speakers have already mentioned, over the last 30 years, the China-ASEAN cooperation has really achieved a lot. I don't want to go back to mention the specific achievements we have made, because the previous speakers, they have already talked a lot. But I do want to mention what are the experience for the achievement over the last 30 years of ASEAN-China dialogue relation. In my view, the experience for our success of 30 years of cooperation are really, the following. First, mutual respect. We have been following the principle of mutual respect, over the last 30 years. And second, win-win cooperation. It is obvious, because of the win-win cooperation, we have been, making effort. That is why we are here, to be, the most important trading partner, both for China and ASEAN. And third, ASEAN centrality. ASEAN centrality is really the key of success of East Asia cooperation. And fourth, vigilance on the motivation and intention of the outsiders. We have been always, be vigilant on, what would be, the motivations or intentions of the outsiders. And looking ahead, that is, the topic, we are talking about, the way forward. I, also have, the following views. First, we really need to stick to our shared desire for a common future of peace, stability, and development. This is actually, put forward by His Excellency No Serbigan, permanent representative of the Philippines to ASEAN. The shared desire for a future, for the common future of peace, stability, and prosperity, for our region is really the most important factor for us to be cooperative, for us to, try our effort, to build the trust. And second, we need to further institutionalize China-ASEAN strategic cooperation mechanism. This is also put forward by the previous speaker. We have already had a lot of mechanism, as some of the speakers have already pointed out. China-ASEAN cooperation is the most institutionalized, relationship, and I believe, we still have a lot to do to make sure, the working relationship, the cooperation or the strategic, partnership is really built on, the set institution to make sure the cooperation and friendship, will be sustainable. Third, we need to, make sure our cooperation will be, benefited by, more ordinary people in our region. That is to say, we have a lot of, cooperation. Yes, we have a lot of achievements. We need to think, whether the achievement, whether our cooperation, has been really reached out to, more and more ordinary people in our region. That is to say, we should not only, we need also to build the small roads linking the highway to the villages. And fourth, I believe, we need to build our own narrative of our stories. This is, really true when Professor Kavi, put forward. I really, agree with him. A lot of, regional stories or news, bad or good, positive or negative, usually come from Western media. Actually, we have a lot, in common in the region. We have, we have achieved so much. We have, so many very interesting and touching stories, in our region, or between China-ASEAN, cooperation. We need to, build our own narrative of our own stories, not to be led away or not to be, misled away by, the so-called Western medias. And fifth, we need to learn to navigate cautiously when there are difficulties. Yes, it's true, and it is only natural, when we not always, come eye to eye, on all of the issues. I, agree with what, my old friend, Ambassador Elizabeth Bonsuceso, when she talked about, how to learn to navigate, cautiously, I mean, we do have, some of the disagreements, we may be differ, on some of the issues, including, South China Sea issue, but, we need to have a bigger picture. We need to bear in mind what is the, most important, thing we need to do. Of course, we need to bear in mind peace, stability, development, and prosperity in our region, in our mind, to make sure we will not be, jeopardized by any kind of, ill-intentioned, narrative. When they talk about, the disagreement, or when they, talk about, the so-called, problems. We know that, outsiders are very important, either for our economic development or, for the, regional cooperation, But we also need to be clear, outsiders, they may come and go, like in Afghanistan, like in, what happened in Iraq, or like, what happened in other parts of Middle East, we got to, remember, yes, they can, they even, did a lot, but, they went away and left over, the ruined economies, or, broken societies in the region, We need to, remember, what happened in the history. We need to, make sure, we look forward. And, I am, pretty, optimistic, regarding the future of China-ASEAN, cooperation, with my experience when I was in, Jakarta, to be Chinese ambassador, in ASEAN, I know well, how important ASEAN is, how important, ASEAN-China cooperation is, and how important, the Chinese government attaches to China-ASEAN cooperation. And I'm sure, with the effort of not only, the officials, our leaders, but also, people in academia, we have a lot more to expect. And I do hope, I will have the chance to welcome you all in Beijing when COVID-19, will be over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Xu. Now seems we are behind the time schedule. It's difficult for me to summarize, but however, the three speakers all gave their recommendations, the way forward, and some, for instance, say the new ways for the future, new issues, we have to handle it, and so on. But with a simple summary of three speakers, that is, seems we have the confidence, and China-ASEAN should continue our dialogue and cooperation. So the next seems Q&A. I don't know. I will close this session, and then who chair the Q&A. So I probably give to Mr. My close friend and Anandi, you chair it or you just make a summary?
No. Excuse me, Professor Zhang, but we still have the Q&A session, so if you don't mind, I'll take it over from you. Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Zhang and the panelists for a remarkable third panel. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will now enter the Q&A session of the event. Now, I have 3 questions from members of the media to our panelists. And please bear with me whilst I read all the questions from the media first. Number 1, we have from Phoenix TV Hong Kong, a question to Dr. Yang Yue. China puts forward the concept of dual cycle development. What specific impact will the dual cycle, especially the outer cycle part, have on China-ASEAN cooperation? The second question, also from Phoenix TV Hong Kong, to Ambassador Xu Wu. The direction of China-United States relations is of vital importance to the peaceful development of the Asia-Pacific region, including ASEAN. After the Biden administration took office, the additional tariffs on Chinese products have not yet been abolished. How do you see the direction of the China-US trade war? And third, from Barata Radio, Indonesia, to Mr. Kawi Chongkitapon. In commemoration of the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China dialogue relations, how do you compare ASEAN-China relations with other dialogue partners? And what do you think is the most impressive feature of the ASEAN-China strategic partnership? Now, I also have with me questions from our participants to the panelists. And again, please bear with me whilst I read these questions. I have 3 questions here from Ambassador Po Sutirak, Executive Director of CICP. His first question is directed to Dr. Charmaine. Why is the ASEAN Way less effective in engaging China more strategically? And what is the basis of your claim that China has the upper hand from the ASEAN-China strategic partnership? Now, I noticed that Dr. Charmaine has answered Ambassador Po's question via Zoom, but if she doesn't mind, I would like to give her the time to elaborate her answer further later on. Ambassador Po's second question is directed to Dr. Nguyen Hun Song. He asked, will the COC be ratified by both ASEAN and China in the next 10 years? And what will be the shape and form of this code of conduct? And lastly, the question from Ambassador Po is to Dr. Yang Yue. Dr. Yang mentioned earlier that some ASEAN member states do not trust China. What about China's own perspective? Do you believe that China trusts all ASEAN member states equally? I hope all of our panelists have caught and noted down the questions that are presented by the members of the media and the general audience. Now, in the interest of time, I'd like to begin by giving the screen, I suppose, to Dr. Yang Yue. He has 2 questions addressed to you. Dr. Yang, you have the screen.
Thank you, moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. I'm very pleased to take the question on the dual circulation development pattern, because this is a new thing. It seems that everyone is very concerned and interested in that. Actually, it's newly embraced by China to counter the new situation, such as global uncertainties and the rise of protectionism. But I'd like the audience to bear in your mind that its essence, the essence of this new pattern is not door closing, but further opening up, and more importantly, opening up with higher quality. And Chinese domestic market and foreign market used to be relatively separate, but under this new pattern, 2 markets will be expected to become more interconnected and mutually reinforcing by China's spurring its domestic demand. And regarding its implications or its impact on ASEAN-China cooperation, I think at least 3 important implications. First one, ASEAN-China cooperation under this new pattern will embrace more opportunities, because BRI plays a key role in the new development pattern. And the pandemic witnesses further enhancement of China's cooperation with BRI countries and ASEAN members as well. And in addition, in light of the advantages both sides enjoy, such as geographical locations, economic complementarities, and the momentum in ASEAN-China economic and trade ties, and ASEAN members will be, I think, the most important beneficiary. And secondly, ASEAN-China economic and trade relations under this new pattern, personally speaking, I think will become more balanced and sustainable. Because under this pattern, China's imports are expected to increase and business environment will be further improved. Negative lists will be further cut and China's domestic consumption potential will be further unlocked. So all these changes, I think, could help build a more balanced and sustainable economic and trade ties between ASEAN and China. And thirdly, RCEP and pandemic triggered or boosted industries will inject new vigor to ASEAN-China cooperation. And signing of RCEP is a showcase of China's determination and commitment to opening up wider and with higher quality. So both ASEAN and China will benefit from that. And pandemic triggered or boosted industries such as the digital economy and medicine and health industries will become new growth sectors for ASEAN and China. And that will in turn make both sides more resilient amid the new normal situation of pandemic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Yang. Would you care to answer the ambassador posed question on the trust issue between China and ASEAN? He asked, you mentioned about the ASEAN member states not trusting China, and he asked whether China trusts all ASEAN member states equally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Po, for a question. It's a great pleasure to meet you at this virtual conference. So your question, I think, is relevant to my quotation, right, in my speech. Actually, it's a survey report I borrowed, conducted by ASIS Yusof Ashok Institute, because that's I think the survey only available and for the Chinese scholars, and also Chinese scholars watch very closely that survey result. But I don't think it's, I'm not quite sure whether or not it's representative because as far as I know, the sample is not big for that survey. It's around 1,000 subjects. And also as for your question, that is, do you believe that China trusts all ASEAN member states equally? Well, we don't have the survey available in China on the same topic, on the Chinese public opinion on the mutual trust between China and ASEAN members. So I'm not in a position to represent all Chinese people to give a very clear answer to your question. But as a scholar on China-ASEAN relations, from the academic and also the official stand, China has always been, regarded ASEAN as a priority of neighborhood in its neighborhood diplomacy, and also is very keen on seeking very close cooperation with ASEAN members, and also devoted to building mutual trust between each other. Yeah, I think that's my answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yang. I now invite Ambassador Su to answer the question from Phoenix TV. Ambassador Su, you have the screen.
Thank you very much, and also, thank Phoenix TV Hong Kong for the question. Yes, Biden administration, has come up to power, for some time, and many people are watching closely what will be the China policy for the Biden administration, and regarding the trade war my answer is, very obvious. The trade war will not, solve the problem between China and the US, will not meet, the desire or political, calculation of those people in DC. I may give you the newest figure from our, custom. In 2020, the total trade volume between China and the US reached 586 billion US dollar. That is to say, comparing, to the total trade volume between China and the US, in 2019, the total trade volume between US and China in 2020 increased by 8.3%. So, although, the trade war has been going on for some time, but, the total trade volume between China and the US increased by 8.3%. And, Chinese export to US in 2020 increased by 7.9%. And Chinese import from US also increased by 9.8%. And what is more, during the first 2 months of 2021, Chinese trade with United States increased by 69%. 69%, imagine, what is the figure? So, obviously, the so-called trade war, is not, playing the role which has been expected by, those people in DC. Then why, Trump administration or even, Biden administration, is being slow to change the policy? My answer, is also very obvious. That is because in those people's minds in DC, they think more about political calculation at home. That is to say, the internal and domestic political calculation is much more important to the actual trade issue. That is to say, the trade war is really not about trade. It's about, their political calculation. It's also, of course, their misjudgment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Xu. I now invite Kun Kavi to answer the question from Bharata Radio. Kavi, you have the screen. I'm sorry, Kavi, but you are still muted. Could you unmute yourself?
Well, thank you, Gilang. To answer the question, I have 2 points. The special features of ASEAN-China relations is, number one, the speed. As you can see, whatever China tried to do or propose, if ASEAN accepted, the speed of implementation will be very fast. You can judge from various proposals that has been concretized. For example, Lan Chang Mekong cooperation. So the speed is very unique. Number two, enabling factor that will allow the cooperation, bilateral cooperation projects to institutionalize and also continue. I mean, for example, China often will implement the financial pledge quickly. I have noticed that there are several projects that when both sides agree, it will proceed so fast that sometimes ASEAN's colleagues have to tell the Chinese, slow down, we are member countries. We need to discuss, we need to form a consensus. So I think and the enabling factors to institutionalize the ideas and the projects are the main features of this collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Gawi. May I now invite my colleague, Dr. Charmaine, to answer the question addressed to you. Charmaine, you have the screen. Charmaine, are you still with us? I'm afraid I think we lost Dr. Charmaine Willoughby. By that fact, let's straight go ahead to Dr. Nguyen Hung Son. I'd like to invite Dr. Hung Son now to answer the question from Ambassador Po. Dr. Hung Son, you have the screen.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Ambassador Po for posing the question to me. My answer is that yes, if the COC is ready, well, next year, I think all ASEAN governments are going to be willing to sign on it and to ratify it as soon as possible, because an early conclusion of the Code of Conduct is the interest and is the priority of all ASEAN countries collectively in order to tackle the South China Sea issue. But that said, while we are not rushing to achieve a COC that is not effective, that is not substantive, the COC that ASEAN wants, since you asked the form and shape of the COC, needs to be substantive and needs to be effective. It has to be consistent with existing international law, such as the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And we hope that China will also recognize why it is so important that the COC needs to be so. We believe that China, as a global naval power, and it's soon becoming the #1 global power, an ocean that is properly given based on the UN Charter of the Law of the Sea is in China's very own interest to have. And so the Code of Conduct between China and ASEAN also needs to be in that way. Secondly, when we are wholeheartedly going for the COC, we are ready to also instruct. We are not only supporting it verbally, but we are ready to instruct our agencies on the ground to also faithfully observe the Code of Conduct. And we hope that that would be the case with China too. We hope that the Code of Conduct is something that other agencies in China, future laws adopted by China domestically will also be in line with the Code of Conduct, and will also be in line with international law. Well, I'd have to mention that the recent Coast Guard law in China, I'm afraid that ASEAN is not looking at it favorably, because it raises concern that China's domestic law might not be in line with the expectations of the region. So the Code of Conduct is the way to go, and we hope that China and ASEAN will take a whole government approach on the negotiation, and will make it as consistent as possible with the law of the sea, and because that's the only way for it to succeed and for it to be achieved in the time to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hun Son. And again, I'd like to thank all of our distinguished panelists to answer the questions provided. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid due to the time limitation, I am unable to collect further questions for a second Q&A round. I do apologize for this inconvenience. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, members of the media, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the end of our event. Beforehand, may I invite Mr. Yusuf Wanandi, co-founder of CSIS and vice chair of the CSIS Board of Trustees, to present his closing remark. Pak Yusuf, you may have the screen.
Thank you, Gilang. Well, first of all, of course, thank you very much for all the participants, particularly the role players, moderators, and speakers. May I also especially thank the two ambassadors, co-organizers of this meeting, and that is Ambassador Zhang and Ambassador Servigon. So all of us have spoken, I think, frankly and mainly positively on this relationship, sometimes rather glowingly, but with also some with an undertone of critical approach. I think that is very, I think, useful and very important for us to see the future cooperation. Well, the first commemoration 15 years ago of this relationship between ASEAN and China has been organized and initiated by the governments and appointed by the governments, the first eminent persons talking about our relationship. Basically, more about what has happened in the sense of foundation building. And now, actually, what we would like to stress is especially the future relations and the more actually difficult part. Indeed, because as has been said in the meeting, we have had many issues put forward that are critical issues for us and at the same time a very complex one. So therefore, this second part, this next 30 years or so, we hope that the think tanks would like to take over, to also participate in talking about this relationship, our relationship between China and ASEAN, and establish, our views on how to cooperate and how to face these new challenges we have had so far. So therefore, I am would like to actually announce to you that we are going to have a kind of a fission group to be established, ASEAN and China together, and we are going to have 10 or so members, and from ASEAN, and 5 think tanks and great thinkers from China at the same time. So we would like to talk about, as I said earlier, about the future. And more specifically, we would like to talk first, the challenge, of course, of the COVID pandemic and its aftermath. Although countries in the East Asian region in general have fought better in getting through the pandemic, but compared to most region, but the pandemic is still not over with us, and it might take 1 year, 2 years, who knows, in the future before we have overcome it. And therefore, this is one definitely a very important item to be picked up. Second one is still related to the pandemic, but much more fundamental, and that is the challenge how to recover from the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. This is especially important for the least developed countries, but not only the least developing countries, but also for the whole world. And on this issue, of course, we have to take care of many, many issues, and not the least, for instance, that has been said, in relation to this, about what changes is willing to be brought in the global value chains, and the problems of environment, as has been said, as the most critical issue that we are going to face. So this is the second one. The third one is the strategic relationships in the region that is changing, where the US and China are increasingly becoming competitors. And there is a great danger of misunderstanding in this great power competition. And both major powers are needed in finding the solution of the world critical issues at the same time. So that we need some cooperation on their side, including on the environmental and climate change, on the non-proliferation, and on global health. Fourth, we also have to anticipate increasing tension between the major powers in relation to the situation of the South China Sea. So much has been mentioned today on the South China Sea. And indeed, tension is increasing, and even in countries and ASEAN are feeling the pressure, especially, of course, in this relationship for the claimants countries. And we need to prevent such an increase of tensions. And therefore, as has been mentioned, the finalizing of the COC is a critical issue, which trust is definitely will be strengthened, and therefore, we have to work on this. But not only on the COC. I thought for CBMs, confidence building measures, we should also have joint cooperation on many actually resources, and including fisheries. And one important but very difficult issue is to reach an agreement on the code of unplanned encounters at sea. Now, maybe we cannot call it a code, supposedly, according to Fifi, but anyhow, this is very important, and that is non-military vessels or non-military vessels in the South China Sea. Fifth, related to the Belt and Road Initiative, we need to plan how is expanding cooperation in the context of BRI and ASEAN countries and China can happen. And here, we would like to see more openness, more multilaterality in cooperation of the BRI in the future. And in this context, of course, as also in the economic relationship, the global value chains, as I said, and the participation of ASEAN countries also has been mentioned in the high-tech development and to make partnership more meaningful and long-term. Now, last but not least, is people-to-people relationship. And we are looking forward here to put more attention to this, because as we have known, the relationship between us and the trust that has to be established is not only between governments, but also mainly between the people and people. And in this relationship, a lot has to be said, that we could follow the kind of model that we have had, for instance, that we have seen in Europe between all the EU countries. The Erasmus, actually, a strategy of them to exchange students. And maybe we can start with that, but also a lot more, actually, of education, I think, in China. And Chinese coming to ASEAN is a very important part of it. And then, last but not least, of course, to know more about culture and history is a very important part that we should look into that too. So these are some of the issues that we have picked up, and this has been actually also much more strengthened by the mentioning today in our conference about all these aspects, that we are going to do some more work in the future on these issues. But your presence here and your exchanges here are most welcome as a kind of a start for this kind of cooperation that we are going to continue. Thank you for your kind attention and for your attendance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pak Yusuf, for your closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an honor for me to be the master of ceremony at the first Jakarta Forum. Now, I understand we are around 30 minutes behind schedule, but I think we can still salvage our lunchtime. I would like once again to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each of our distinguished guests, speakers, moderators, and participants for lending their time and take part at the event. On behalf of the organizer, I would like to formally close the first Jakarta Forum on ASEAN-China relations. We wish you a pleasant day ahead, stay healthy, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak Yusuf.
Thank you.
Kami see you.
Thank you very much, Pak Yusuf.
See you later.
Nandi.
All the guests.
This is from William.
Thank you, Chang.
Best wish.